A very good afternoon, everyone. We are super excited to be here on this particular occasion. Today, we are doing a special readathon to celebrate World Book Day and birthday of William Shakespeare. So, we'll try to walk you through the different ages of English literature and give you a sneak peek into each age. Here, you will find the most exceptional works from the canon of English literature. Our beginnings can be traced far back to the time of Homer and Virgil, but today we are not going that back. We are starting from a time modern English started. It was an age of revival and rebirth. I'm sure you have guessed it. It's Renaissance. And since we are celebrating the Bard, why not start from none other than William Shakespeare himself? So, over to Shweta, our first reader for today.
Sonnets of Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was the famous dramatist, sonneteer, and a poet of Elizabethan age. He had written 37 plays, 154 sonnets, which was addressed to W.H. And he had also written 2 long narrative poems, namely Rape of Lucrece and Venus and Adenine. Sonnet number 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. And summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Sonnet number 57. Being your slave, what should I do but tend upon the hours and times of your desire? I have no precious time at all to spend, nor services to do till you require. Nor dare I chide the world without end hour. Whilst I, my sovereign, watch the clock for you. Nor think the bitterness of absence sour. When you have bit your servant once, did you? Nor dare I questioned with my jealous thought where you may be, or your affairs suppose. But like a sad slave, stay and think of not. Save where you are, how happy you make those. So true a fool is love, that your will, though you do anything, he thinks no ill.
After these wonderful sonnets, we have Bhavna with us to remind us and brief us about one of the most wonderful play written by William Shakespeare. Over to you, Bhavna.
Merchant of Venice. A young Venetian, Bassanio, needs a loan of 3,000 ducats so that he can woo Portia, a wealthy Venetian heiress. He approaches his friend Antonio, a merchant. Antonio is short of money because all his wealth is invested in his fleet, which is currently at sea. He goes to a Jewish moneylender, Shylock, who hates him because of his anti Semitic behavior towards him. Shylock nevertheless agrees to make the short term loan, but In a moment of dark humor, he makes a condition. The loan must be repaid in 3 months, or Shylock will exact a pound of flesh from Antonio. Antonio agrees, confident that the ships will return in time. Because of the terms of Portia's father's will, all suitors must choose from among 3 caskets, one of which contains a portrait of her. If he chooses that he may marry Portia, but if doesn't, he must vow never to marry or court another woman. The princes of Morocco and Aragon fail the test and are rejected. As Bassanio prepares to travel to Belmont for the test, his friend Lorenzo elopes with Shylock's daughter, Jessica. Bassanio chooses the lead casket, which contains her picture, and Portia is happily agreed to marry him immediately. Meanwhile, 2 of Antonio's ships have been wrecked, and Antonio's creditors are pressuring him for repayment. Word comes to Bassanio about Antonio's predicament, and he hurries back to Venice, leaving Portia behind. Portia follows him, accompanied by her maid Nerissa. They are disguised as a male lawyer and his clerk. When Bassanio arrives, the date for the repayment to Shylock has passed, and Shylock is demanding his pound of flesh. Even when Bassanio offers much more than the amount in repayment, Shylock, now infuriated by the loss of his daughter, is intent on seeking revenge on the Christians. The Duke refuses to intervene. Portia arrives in a disguise to defend Antonio. Given the authority of judgment by the Duke, Portia decides that Shylock can have a pound of flesh as long as he doesn't draw blood, as it's against the law to shed Christians' blood. Since it is obvious that to draw a pound of flesh would kill Antonio, Shylock is denied his suit. Moreover, for conspiring to murder a Venetian citizen, Portia orders that he should forfeit all his wealth. Half is to go to Venice and half to Antonio. Antonio gives his half back to Shylock on the condition that Shylock bequeaths it to his disinherited daughter Jessica. Shylock must also convert to Christianity. A broken Shylock accepts. News arrives that Antonio's remaining ships have returned safely. With the exception of Shylock, all celebrate a happy ending to the affair.
Renaissance also saw wonderful philosophers. We have Neelam with us to talk about one such philosopher who was real close to inventing modern fridge. So over to you, Neelam.
Of Love by Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626. The stage is more beholding to love than the life of man. For as to the stage, love is ever matter of comedies, and now and then of tragedies. But in life, it doth much mischief, sometimes like a siren, sometimes like a fury. You may observe that amongst all the great and worthy persons whereof the memory remaineth, either ancient or recent, there is not one that had been transported to the mad degree of love, which shows that great spirits and great business to keep out this weak passion. You must accept, nevertheless, Marcus Antonius, the half partner of the empire of Rome, and Appius Claudius, the decemvir and lawgiver, whereof the former was indeed a voluptuous man and inordinate, but the latter was an austere and wise man, and therefore it seems, though rarely, that love can find entrance not only in an open heart, but also into a heart well fortified, if watch be not well kept. It is a poor saying of Epicurus, Satis magnum alter itheritum sumus, as if man, made for contemplation of heaven and all noble objects, should do nothing but kneel before a little idol and make himself a subject, though not of the mouth, as beasts are, yet of the eye, which was given him for higher purposes. It is a strange thing to note the excess of this passion and how it braves the nature and values of things. By this, that the speaking in a perpetual hyperbole is calmly in nothing but in love, neither is it merely in the phrase. For whereas it had been well said that the arch flatterer with whom all the petty flatterers have intelligence is a man's self, certainly the lover is more, for there was never a proud man thought so absurdly well of himself as the lover doth of the person loved. And therefore it was well said that it is impossible to love and be wise. Neither doth this weakness appear to others only, and not to the party loved, but to the loved most of all, except the love be reciprocal. For it is a true rule that love is ever rewarded either with the reciprocal or with an inward or secret contempt. By how much the more man ought to beware of this passion, which loseth not only other things but itself. As for the other losses, the poet's relation doth well figure them, that he that preferred Helena quitted the gifts of Juno and Pallas, for whosoever esteems too much of amorous affection quitteth both riches and wisdom. This passion hath his floods in the very times of weakness, which are great prosperity and great adversity, though this latter hath been less observed, both which times kindle love and make it more fervent, and therefore show it to be the child of folly. They do best who, if they cannot but admit love, yet make it keep quarter and savor it wholly from dear serious affairs and action of life. For if it check once with business, it troubleth man's fortunes and maketh men that they cannot ways be true to their own ends. I know not how, but material men are given to love. I think it is but as they are given to wine. For perils commonly asked to be paid in pleasures. There is in man's nature a secret inclination and motion towards love of others, which, if it be not spent upon some one or a few, doth naturally spread itself towards many, and maketh men become human and charitable, as it is seen sometime in friars. Nuptial love maketh mankind, friendly love perfecteth it, but wanton love corrupteth and embasseth it.
After this philosophical essay, let's get ready to hear some metaphysical poetry recited by Anjali.
John Donne. Donne is the most famous poet in a category termed by Samuel Johnson as the metaphysical poets. Metaphysical poems use conceits and unconventional metaphors to illustrate their points. Major theme that echoes in his poems is the tension between physical desire and religious righteousness. Other features of metaphysical poetry are unusual rhyme scheme and ambiguous humor and double meaning. The flea. Mark, but this flea and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first and now sucks thee, and in this flea our two bloods mingle be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said, a sin, no shame, nor loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before ye too, and pampered swell. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Oh, stay, 3 lives in one flea spare, where we almost nigh more than married are. This flea is you and I. And marriage temple is, though parents grudge. and you, we are met and clustered in these living walls of jet. Though use make you and to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3, cruel and sudden has those sins. Purple thy nail in blood of innocence, wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou time fast and sayest that thou findest not thyself nor me the vicar now. It is true. Then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor, when thou earnest to me, will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. In this poem, the speaker argues he and the beloved are more than married, enclosed within the flea's body, rather exotically described as living walls of jet. But somewhere between stanza second and third, the beloved kills the flea. Its innocent blood has purpled her nail. For Donne, love is not physical but spiritual. Thus, it can be said that Donne plunged deep in metaphysical pursuits. His selection of subject matter, his treatment, his diction, and style prove him to be a true and great metaphysical poet. Next work of John Donne, Holy Sonnet. Death be not proud. Death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkest thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor it canst thou kill me from rest and sleep, which but by pictures be. Much pleasure then from the much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee to go. Rest of their bones and souls delivery, thou art slave to fate, chance, kings and desperate men, and those with poison, war, and sickness dwell, and poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke, well, swellest thou then. One short sleep pass, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Overall, in this poem, Death Be Not Proud, this is a masterful argument against the power of death. The theme or the message of this poem is that death is not some all-powerful being that humans should fear. Instead of that, death is actually a slave to the human race and has no power over our souls. That's it.
After this, the politics of England saw a very unstable time. When it came to stability with the restoration of Charles II, we had a very great poet who was always with order against chaos and disorder. He always sided with order, which made people call him an opportunist. Nevertheless, if he changed with the changing times. So let's welcome Ashwati to read out a wonderful work by him. Over to you, Ashwati. MacLechno, or a satire upon the true blue Protestant poet. During his lifetime, John Dryden was an esteemed poet, literary critic, and playwright. His influence was so large that the literary period after the restoration of Charles II is also called the Age of Dryden. Dryden's literary abilities were recognized by the Stuart monarchy in 1668 when he was made England's first poet laureate. In addition to his role as poet laureate, Dryden is best remembered for his refinement of English verse. his development of the critical preface and his satires. MacFlecknoe, or a satire upon the true blue Protestant poet TS. A mock epic satiric poem set in London is one of Dryden's earliest satires, completed 1679, published 1682. MacFlecknoe solidified Dryden's reputation as a talented poet and satirist. His use of irony and heroic verse in particular had a visible influence on later Restoration satirists such as Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift. The poem itself is relatively short, amounting to 217 lines. The poem has an epic tone. The mock epic is a direct attack on Thomas Shadwell, one of Dryden's contemporaries. MacFlecknoe positions Shadwell as a son of Richard Flecknoe, thus the title MacFlecknoe or Son of Flecknoe, an earlier poet known for his mediocre and predictable verse.
Synopsis. Dryden looms his political and literary antagonist, the playwright Thomas Shadwell, by depicting him as heir to the throne of literary dullness, left by him by the notoriously bad poet Richard Flecknoe. The details of Shadwell's life are somewhat sketchy, but the following fact is not in dispute. Before Dryden published MacFlecknoe, Shadwell was considered by many to be one of the most important living English playwrights. But his reputation has not yet recovered. According to Shadwell's scholar, I quote, because most critics have read Dryden and not Shadwell, or because they have not penetrated MacFlecknoe's deceptive premise about Shadwell's opposition to wit, or because they have been pleased with the fiction, they have accepted and promulgated the satire's fallacious conclusions. It appears MacFlecknoe has been so convincing that habitually just and perceptive critics lose control on describing or evaluating Shadwell. Quotes close. Credit Kunz. Following common practice in such satirical literary skirmishes, Dryden never mentions Shadwell by name, but instead refers only to SH. This transparent pretense paid lip service to the idea of protecting the identity of the victim, who was in fact readily identifiable, and made those who could identify the victim feel as if they were in on a secret joke. In this case, using SH also allows Dryden to perpetrate a number of scatological puns equating his victim with excrement, a major theme in the poem. On a more superficial level, Dryden's sources for the poem include the works of Shadwell himself, to which Dryden frequently refers, as well as works of literary forebearers such as Johnson. Again, the immediate catalyst for MacFlecknoe seems to have been Shadwell's The Virtuoso, in which Shadwell excuses any faults by complaining that he does not have the luxury of writing on the pension awarded to others. Directed at Dryden, the barb probably inspired the retort that became MacFlecknoe. Excerpts. It begins with a description of aging Flecknoe, monarch of all the realms of nonsense, who, like King Charles II, must settle the question of his succession. All human things are subject to decay, and when fate summons, monarchs must obey. This Flecknoe found, who like Augustus, young, was called to empire, and had governed long, in prose and verse, was owned without dispute. Through all the realms of nonsense absolute. This aged prince, now flourishing in peace, and blessed with issues for a large increase, worn out with business, did at length debate Richard Flecknoe choosing Shadwell as his successor. To settle the succession of the state, and pondering which of all his sons was fit to reign and wage immortal war with wit, cried 'tis resolved, for nature pleads that he should only rule who most resembles me. Shadwell alone my perfect image bears, mature in dullness from his tender years. Shadwell alone of all my sons is he who stands confirmed in full stupidity. At length burst out in this prophetic mood, heavens bless my son from Ireland to him reign to far Barbadoses on the western main. Of his dominion may no end be known, and greater than his father be his throne. Beyond love's kingdom, let him stretch his pen. He paused, and all the people cried Amen. Then thus continued he, my son, advance, still in new impudence, new ignorance. Success let other teach. Learn thou from me pangs without birth and fruitless industry. Let virtue sows in 5 years be writ, yet not one thought accuses thy toil to wit. The last stanza comprises another speech by Flecknoe. His previous speech, it begins as a prophecy that to Shadwell's dominion may no end be known, and that he may advance still in new impudence and ignorance. Former King Flecknoe continues in his vein until when he shifts tone and offers Shadwell advice. Much of this advice flirts and insults. Flecknoe's speech is soon interrupted, however, as he falls through a trap door set by Bruce and Longueville. As Flecknoe falls, his mantle catches an updraft and falls on Shadwell's shoulders, solidifying his place as new ruler over MacFlecknoe's kingdom. Leave writing place and choose for thy command some peaceful province in acrostic land. There thou mayest swings display and altars raise, and torture one poor word 10,000 ways. Set thy own songs and sing them to thy lute. He said, but his last words were scarcely heard, for Bruce and Longueville had trapped prepared, and down thy sent the yet
Declaiming bard. Sinking he left his druggist robe behind, borne upwards by a subterranean wind. The mantle fell to the younger prophet's part, with double portion of his father's art. Synopsis credits, super summary. Now, I would like to call Ritu Medhavi to read Canto 1 of The Rape of the Lock.
Alexander Pope is a name we can't forget while mentioning neoclassical age. He was a great poet, satirist, and the most epigrammatic of all English authors. Rape of the Lock was written by him to walk out two families from a trivial issue. What dire offense from amorous causes springs? What mighty contest rise from trivial things? I sing this verse to Carl Muse's due, this even Belinda may vouchsafe to view. Slight is the subject, but not so the praise, if she inspire and he approve my lays. Say, what strange motive, goodness, could compel a well-bred lord to assault a gentle belle? Oh, say, what stranger cause yet unexplored could make a gentle belle reject a lord? In tasks so bold can little men engage, and in soft bosom dwell such mighty rage. Saw through white curtains shot a timorous ray, and opened those eyes that must eclipse the day. Now lapdogs give themselves their rousing shake, and sleepless lovers just at 12 awake. Thrice rang the bell, the slipper knocked the ground, and the pressed watch returned a silver sound. Belinda, still her downy pillow pressed, her guardian sylph prolonged her balmy rest. 'Twas he had summoned to her silent bed the morning dream that hovered over her head, a yang more glittering than a bright night bow, that even in slumber caused her cheeks to glow. Seemed to her ear his whining lips to say, and thus in whispers said or seemed to say, fairest of mortals, thou distinguished care of thousand bright inhabitants of air, if ever one vision touched thy infant thought, of all the nurse and all the priest have taught, of airy elves by moonlit shadows seen, the silver token and the circle green, of virgins visited by angel powers, with golden crowns and wreaths of heavenly flowers. Hear and believe thy own importance know, nor bound thy narrow views to things below. Some secret truth. Some secret truth from learned pride concealed, to mates alone and children are revealed. What though no credit doubting wits may give, the fair and innocent shall still believe. Know then, unnumbered spirits round thee fly, the light militia of the lower sky. These, though unseen, are ever on the wing, hang over the box and hover round the ring. Think what an equipage thou hast in air, and view with scorn 2 pages and a chair. As now your own, our beings were of old, and once enclosed in women's beauteous mold. Then by a soft transition we repair from earthly vehicles to these of air. Think not when women transient breath is fled, that all her vainties at once are dead. Succeeding vainties she still regards, and though she plays no more, overlooks the cards. Her joy in gilded chariots when alive, and love of home after death survive. For when the fear in all the pride expire, to the first elements their soul retire. The spirits of fiery termagants and flame mount up and take a salamander's name. Soft yielding minds to water glide away and sip with limbs the elemental tail. The graver prude sinks downward to a gnome in search of mischief still on earth to roam. The light coquette in sylph aloft repair and sport and flutter in the fields of air. No further yet, whoever fair and chaste rejects mankind as by some self-embrace. For spirits, freed from mortal laws with ease, assume what sexes and what shapes they please. What guards the purity of melting mates in courtly balls and midnight masquerades? Save from the treacherous friend the daring spark, the glance by day and the whisper in the dark. When kind occasions prompt their warm desires, when music softens and when dancing fires, 'tis but the sylph the wise celestials know, though honor is the word with the men below. Some nymphs there are, too conscious of their face, for life predestined to the gnome's embrace. These swell their prospects and exalt their pride, when offers are disdained and love denied. Then gay ideas crowd the vacant brain, while peers and dukes and all the sweeping train, and greater stars and coronets appear, and in soft sound your grace salutes the ear. 'Tis these that early taint the female soul, instruct the eyes of young coquettes to roll, teach infant cheeks a bidden blush to know, and little hearts to flutter at a bow. Oft, when the world imagined women stray, the sylphs through mystic mazes guide the way, through all the giddy circle they pursue, and old impertinence expel by new. What tender maid but must a victim fall to one man's reed, but for another's ball? When Florio speaks, what virgin could withstand if gentle Damon did not squeeze her hand? With waiting vanities from every part, they shift the moving toy shop of the heart, where wigs with wigs and sword knots strive, bob banish bob, and coaches ride. This erring mortal's levity may call, oh, blind to truth, the sylphs contrive it all. Of these am I, who thy protection claim, a watchful spirit, and Ariel is my name. Late as I rank the celestial wilds of air, in the clear mirror of thy ruling star, I saw, alas, some dread event impend. Ere to the main this morning shall descend, but heaven reveals not what or how or where. Warned by the sylph, O pious maid, beware. This is to disclose, is all thy guardian can. Beware of all, but most beware of man. He said when Shock, who thought she slept too long, leaped up and waked his mistress with his tongue. 'Twas Belinda, if reports say true, thy eyes first opened on a billet doux. Wounds, charms, and ardors are no sooner read, but all the vision vanished from thy head. And now unveiled, the toilet stand displayed, each silver vase in mystic order laid. First robed in white, the nymph intent adores, with head uncovered, the cosmetic pours. A heavenly image in the glass appears, to that she bends, to that her eye she rears. The inferior priestess at her altar side, trembling begins the sacred rites of pride. Unnumbered treasures ope at once, and here the varying offerings of the world appear. From each he nicely culls a curious toil and decks the goddess with the glittering spoil. This casket India glowing gems and logs, and all Arabia's breeds from yonder box. The tortoise here and elephant unite, transformed to combs that speckled and the white. Here files of pins extend their shining rows, puffs, powder, patches, Bible, and billet dough. Now awful beauty puts on all its arms, and fear each movement rises in her charms. Repair she smiles, awakens every grace, and calls forth all the wonders of her face. Sees by degree a purer blush arise, and keener lightning quicken in her eyes. The busy sylphs surrounded darling care, they set the head and those divide the hair. Some fold the sleeve while others plait the gown, and Betty prays for labors not her own. We all know in neoclassical times, the classical writers and their work served as models for writers. The age after that witnessed romantic revival, where external nature was extolled by many and common men were celebrated. So we have Farah with us with one such exciting work.
Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard is a famous poem written by Thomas Gray. Thomas Gray is categorized as transition poet as he belonged to the time when neoclassical age was coming to an end and romantic age was going to commence. Gray began writing this poem in 1742 following the death of his very close friend Richard West. He completed the poem in 1750 and was sent to his friend Horace Walpole, who popularized the poem among London literary circles. Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard is a great poem which has continued to entertain and inspire people in all ages. The poem is an elegy in name but not in form. It employs a style similar to that of contemporary odes, but it embodies a meditation on death and remembrance after death. The predominant theme of the poem is memento mori, which means remember you must die. Now let's move on to the poem. Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard by Thomas Gray. The curfew tolls the bell of parting day, the lowing herd wind slowly o'er the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way, and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight, and all the air a solemn stillness holds. Save where the beetle wheels his droning flight, and drowsy tinglings lull the distant falls. Save that from yonder ivy mantled tower, the moping owl does to the moon complain, of such as wandering near her secret bower. Molest her ancient solitary ring, beneath those rugged ends that you trees shade, there heaves the toffing many a mouldering heap, each in his narrow cell for air laid. The rude forefathers of the hamlet, the breezy call of incense breathing morn, the swallow twittering from the straw-built shed, the cock shrill clarion on the
cockshrill clarion on the echoing horn, no more shall rouse them from the lowly bed. For them, no more the blazing hearth shall burn, or busy housewife ply her evening care. Now children run to lips, their sighs return, or climb his knees, the end which is to share. Oft did the harvest to the sickle yield, their furrow of the stubborn seed has broke. How jocund did they drive the team afield, oh, the woods beneath their sturdy stroke. Let not ambition mock the useful toil.
Their homely Their homely joys and destiny obscure, nor grandeur here with a disdainful smile. The sure and simple annals of the poor, the boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all their beauty, all their wealth or gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory led but to the grave, nor you, ye proud, imbue to these the fault. If memory o'er their tomb no trophies raise, bear through the long drawn aisle and fretted vault, the pealing anthem swells the note of praise. Can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? Can honor's voice provoke the silent dust of flattery, soothe the dull cold ear of death? Perhaps in this neglected spot is laid some heart once pregnant with celestial fire, hands that the rod of empire might have swayed, or wake to ecstasy the living lyre. But knowledge to their eyes her ample page, rich with the spine did draw. Their noble rage and froze the genial current of the soul. Full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark, unfathomed gates of ocean bear. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen, and waste its sweetness on the desert air. Some village Hampden that with dauntless breast the little torrent of his fears withstood. Some mute inglorious Milton here may rest, some Cromwell guiltless of his country's blood. The applause of listening senates to command, the threats of pain and ruin to despise, to scatter plenty o'er a smiling land, and read their history in a nation's eyes. Their Lord forbade no circumscribed alone, their growing virtues but their crimes confined, forbade to wade through slaughter to a throne, and shut the gates of mercy on mankind, the struggling pangs of conscious truth to hide, to quench the blushes of ingenious shame, or heap the shrine of luxury and pride with incense kindled at the muse's flame. Far from the madding crowd's ignoble strife, their sober wishes now learn to stray. Along the cool sequestered vale of life, they kept the noiseless tenor of their way. Yet even this bond from insult to protect, some frail memorial still erected nigh, with uncouth rhymes and shapeless sculpture decked, implores the passing tribute of a sigh, the name their ears spelt by the unlettered muse. The plays of fame and elegy supply, and many a holy text around she strews, that teach the rustic moralist to die. For who to dumb forgetfulness a prey, thus pleasing anxious being a resigned, left the warm presence of the cheerful day, nor cast one longing, lingering look behind? On some fond breast the parting soul relies, some pious drop the closing eye requires. Even from the tomb the voice of nature cries, even in our ashes leave their wounded fires. For thee, who mindful of the unhonored, that dost in these lines their artless tale relate, if chance by lonely contemplation led, some kindred spirit shall inquire thy fate. Haply some hoary-headed swain may say, oft have we seen him at the peep of dawn, brushing with hasty steps the dews away, to meet the sun upon the upland lawn. Their at the foot of yonder nodding beech that rests its old fantastic roots so high. His listless length at noontide would he stretch, and pour upon the brook that babbles by. Hard by yon wood now smiling as in scorn, muttering his wayward fancies he would rove, now drooping woeful wan like one forlorn, or crazed with care or crossed in hopeless love. One morn I missed him on the customed hill, along the heath and near his favourite tree. Neither came nor yet beside the rill, nor up the lawn, nor at the wood was he. The next with dogers due in sad array, slow through the church we passed, we saw him borne. Approach and read, for thou canst read the lay, graved on the stone beneath yon aged thorn. Here rests his head upon the lap of earth, a youth to fortune and to fame unknown. Fair signs frowned not on his humble birth, and melancholy marked him for her own. Large was his bounty and his soul sincere. Heaven did a recompense as largely sent. He gave to misery all he had, a tear. He gained from heaven 'twas all he wished, a friend. No further seek his merits to disclose, or draw his frailties from their dead abode. There they alike in trembling hope repose, the bosom of his Father and his God.
Now, I would like to call Pratima to introduce Romantic Ease.
The Romantic Age is from 1798 to 1824. Romanticism was a literary movement that began in the late 18th century, ending around the middle of the 19th century, although its influence continues to this day. The Romantic period is the most fruitful period in the history of English literature. Wordsworth chose the language of the common people as the vehicle of his poetry because it is the most sincere expression of the deepest and rarest passions and feelings. William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth is from 7th April 1770 to 23rd April 1850. He was an English romantic poet who, with S.D. Coleridge, helped to launch the Romantic Age in English literature with their joint publication, Lyrical Ballads, in 1798. Wordsworth was poet laureate from 1843 until his death from pleurisy on 23rd April 1850. The poem Daffodils was composed in the year 1802. The title of the poem informs about the loneliness of the poet, which he faces after his death of his brother. However, the endless view of the golden daffodils in the field across the lake filled him with joy. This view was the greatest gift of nature to him. Whenever he remembers it, his depressed mind and heart find the joy of living again. Now, let me see the poetic lines. Daffodils. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. When all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Next, we are going to see Keats. John Keats. John Keats is from 31st October 1795 to 23rd February 1821. He was an English poet of the second generation of Romantic poets with Lord Byron and P.B. Shelley. Although his poems had been in publication for less than 4 years when he died of tuberculosis at the age of 25. John Keats was an English Romantic lyric poet whose verse is known for its vivid imagery and great sensuous appeal. His reputation grew after his early death, and he was greatly admired in the Victorian age. To Atom is the last major work that Keats completed before his death in Rome in 1821, where the 25-year-old succumbed to tuberculosis. The poem praises Atom, describing its abundance, harvest, and transition into winter, and uses intense sensuousness imagery to elevate the fleeting beauty of the moment. To Atom. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bliss with fruit the vines that round the chiefs run, to bend with apples the most cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plum the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more, and still more later flowers are for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease. For summer has overbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the unknowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, roused with the fume of poppies, while thy hoop spares the next swat and all its twined flowers. And sometimes, like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cedar press with patient look, thou watchest the last wooings harped by us. Where are the songs of spring? Ay, where are they? Think nor of them, thou hast thy music too, while barred clouds bloom the soft dying day and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue. Then in a wailful choir the small gnats moan among the river shallows, borne aloft, or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. And full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the red-breast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies.
After this, I would like to invite Meera to read out yet another amazing work by one of the founders of Romantic age. Over to you, Meera.
Written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Kubla Khan is a very famous poem, sometimes subtitled A Fragment and other times A Vision in a Dream. It was written in 1797 but published only in 1816 and has an interesting backstory. According to Coleridge, he had an opium influenced dream about Xanadu, the place described in the poem, when he fell asleep after reading a book about Shangdu, the summer capital of the Yuan dynasty, founded by the Mongol emperor Kublai Khan. In his dream, Coleridge claimed to have written about 300 lines of the poem. As soon as he woke up, he rushed to put down all the lines on paper. However, he was interrupted by a visitor from Porlock and could not remember the whole poem as he dreamt it. This is why he considered the poem in its current state, with 54 lines, a fragment. Person from Porlock, man from Porlock, or simply Porlock became literary allusions to the unwanted intruders who disrupt inspired creativity. Now, without further ado, let's enjoy Kubla Khan. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure-dome decree, where Alph, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man down to a sunless sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground, with walls and towers, were girdled round, and there were gardens bright with sinuous rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree. And here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. But oh, that deep romantic chasm which slanted down the green hill athwart a sedan cover. A savage place, as holy and enchanted as ever beneath a waning moon was haunted by woman wailing for her demon lover. And from this chasm with ceaseless turmoil ceasing, as if this earth in fast thick pans were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose swift half-intermitted burst huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail, or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail. And mid these dancing rocks at once and ever, it flung up momently the sacred river. 5 miles meandering with a mazy motion, through wood and dale the sacred river ran, then reached the caverns measureless to man, and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And mid this tumult Kubla heard from far ancestral voices prophesying war. The shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountain and the caves. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. Could I revive within me her symphony and song? To such a deep delight would win me, that with music loud and long, I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome, those caves of ice, and all who heard should see them there, and all should cry, beware, beware. His flashing eyes, his floating hair, weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honeydew hath fed, and drank the milk of paradise.
Now, as we move towards Victorian age, we see that it was a time for diversity. All sort of genres were explored and all sort of poetry written. We had at this time a great practitioner of dramatic monologue. Let me request Ambika to recite to us the next work.
Robert Browning was born in 1812, the son of fairly liberal parents who took an interest in his education and personal growth. He read voraciously as a youth and began to write poetry while still quite young, influenced by P.B. Shelley. whose radicalism urged a rethinking of modern society. This poem, My Last Touches, is probably based on Alfonso II, Duke of Ferrara, whose first wife, Lucrezia, at the age of 17, died in a very suspicious circumstances. It was the based on Ferrara, which is a well-fortified city of Lower Lombardy in Italy. The poem is historically well defined within the short range of 56 lines. That is my last duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Fra Pandolf's hands walked busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus, sir. It was not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the duchess's cheek. Perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, it was all one. My favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the ways, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who would stoop to blame this sort of trifling, even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one? And say, just this or that in you disgust me. Here you miss, or there you exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessened so, nor plainly said her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew. I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Will it please you rise? We will meet the company below then. I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed. Though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed, at starting is my object. Nay, we will go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which claws up in Sprague, cast in bronze for me.
Victorian age was also an age of dilemma. We have all heard about Victorian dilemma, and we have Shilby with us to read out a famous poem about the same.
Dawa Beach is written by Matthew Arnold in 1851. He is one among the greatest poets of Victorian era. Even before Darwin's Origin of Species was published, we can see the traces of evolutionary theory in this poem. It represents Victorian dilemma and also modernist and existentialist theme of doubt, alienation, and anxiety. Set in Dawa, which is a port on the southeastern tip of the England, overlooking the French coast, this poem presents personal reflections and anxieties that are transformed into cultural concerns of humanity. Even the meter and the flow of the verse is disrupted throughout, suggesting free verse, which again reiterates the erratic theme of the poem. Dawa Beach by Matthew Arnold. The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the strait. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliff of England stands glimmering and vast. Out in the tangling bay, come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles, which the waves draw back and fling. At their return up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence low, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle flood. But now I only hear its melancholy, long, withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the wind of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Allow, let's be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, no certitude, no peace, no health for pain. And we are here on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of the struggle and fright, ignorance armies by night.
At times, we are perplexed with the thought of how to achieve our success and what to do and what not. Our next reader, Harshika, is to inspire and encourage us with the poem
It is a poem by English Nobel laureate Rudyard Kipling, who was born in 1865 and died in 1936. This poem was published in 1910. It is written as a tribute to Leander Steer Jameson. Now let's start with the poem. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing their and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about you, don't deal in lies or being hated. Don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. The poet tells his son that he should keep calm and patient when others do fail and put blames on you. He should trust himself when others doubt him. One should wait patiently for success and should never be tired by waiting because success comes to those who work hard and remain patient. The other people will often tell his lies. However, he should remain truthful. If he act upon all the advices the poet gave above, he will be looked too good, wise above among the common people. If you can dream and not make dream your master, if you can think and not make thought your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you have spoken, to stir by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and to stoop and pulled up with the worn out tools. These lines tells us that he should dream big, but never make the dream his master. He should think good, but never make thoughts his aim. Triumph and disaster have been capitalized. These are the two extremes of life. They either make one extremely happy or miserable. We should also have the courage to see the things built up him in broken condition and try rebuilding them with same energy or skill you have. Third stanza, we say we look at, you can make one heap of all your winning and risk in on turn, on pitch or loss, and start again it at your beginning and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If one fails after facing big risk, we should start again from the beginning without thinking or saying anything about the loss to others. One should try again and again until one succeeds. One should use his courage when one becomes tired or fails. When nothing is left in you, one should have a strong willpower which may encourage of us and says, hold on. The last passage we look at this, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, nor or talk with kings, nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that is in you. Be man, my son. The poet says that when one is poor, he should keep his virtue and he becomes rich. He should never ego. He should never be give other too much importance or else he will get emotionally attached to them, which will hurt him in the future. According to him, time is precious and never be come back. Hence, one should start utilizing each and every second of our life. In the last lines, the poet says to his son, if he acts upon all the advices he gave above, he will be able to achieve whatever he likes, and he will be a man, a true human. By Arnold, to take over now.
Matthew Arnold, sorry. Matthew Arnold was born on 24th December 1822. He was an English poet and cultural critic who worked as an inspector of schools. He was the son of Thomas Arnold, the celebrated headmaster of Rugby School, and brother of Tom Arnold, who was a literary professor, and William Delafield Arnold, a novelist and colonial administrator. Matthew Arnold has been characterized as a sage writer, a type of writer who chastises and instructs the reader on contemporary social issues. He was also an inspector of schools for 35 years and supported the concept of state regulated secondary education. His notable works include Dover Beach, The Scholar Gypsy, Thereses, Culture and Anarchy, Literature and Dogma, The Study of Poetry, and so on. Here, the poem Shakespeare is a tribute to Shakespeare by Matthew Arnold. Others abide our question, thou art free. We ask and ask, thou smilest, and art still out-topping knowledge. For the loftiest hill, who to the stars uncrowns his majesty, planting his steadfast footsteps in the sea, making the heaven of heavens his dwelling place, spares but the cloudy border of his base, to the foiled searching of mortality, and thou who didst the stars and sunbeams know, self-schooled, self-scanned, self-honored, self-secure, didst tread on earth unguessed at, better so. All pains the immortal spirit must endure, all weakness which impairs, all griefs which bow, find their sole speech in that victorious brow.
Our next reader, Dharni, is going to remind us of those school days when we used to read these wonderful poems by this author, though we did not understand it completely. But today, as students of literature, we get great meanings from these poems. So I'd request Dharni to take over now.
Robert Lee Frost was an American poet. He is known for his realistic depiction of rural life in New England. Frost was the only poet who received 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry. He is one of the America's rare public literary figures, almost an artistic institution. Frost was named Poet Laureate of Vermont. The road not taken. 2 roads diverged in a low wood, and sorry, I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better climb, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Next poem, Stopping Bywoods on a Snowy Evening. It is a short poem told from the perspective of a traveler who stops to watch the snowfall, and in doing so reflects on the conflict between man and nature and the wishes and obligations we face in our lives. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though he will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little house must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year, he gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
After this, we have Shweta with us to read out excerpts from one of the classical works of all time.
Lolita, or The Confession of a White Widowed Male, is a 1955 novel written by Russian-American novelist Vladimir Nabokov. Humbert, a literature professor in his late 30s, obsessed with 12-year-old Dolores Hayes. Lolita is obviously literature with capital L. It is a work by a man of letters who happened to be a genius. For that reason, it deserves reading. We have never read another book written quite like Lolita. The writing has depth, layer upon layer, strata against strata, texture among texture. It is a palimpsest of clues, anagrams, and references. Pushing the boundaries of what acceptable literature can actually be, Lolita is very much a piece of art. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul, Lolita. The tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth, Lolita. She was low, playing low in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in 1 sock. She was Lola in slacks. She was Dolly at school. She was Dolores on the dotted line, but in my arms, she was always Lolita. Did she have a precursor? She did.
Indeed, she did. In a point of fact, there might have been no Lolita at all. Had I not loved one summer, a certain initial girl child in a princedom by the sea? Oh, when, about as many years before Lolita was born as my age was that summer, you can always count on a murderer for a fancy prose child. But how magically his singing violin can conjure up a tendency, a compassion for Lolita that makes us entranced with the book while abhorring its author. Never did she vibrate under my touch, and a strident, "What do you think you're doing?" was all I got for my pains. I discovered there was an endless source of robust enjoying and trifling with psychiatrists, cunningly leading them on. Now letting them see that you know all the tricks of the trade, inventing for them elaborate dreams, pure classics in style, which make them dream extortionist, dream and wake up shrinking, teasing them with fake primal scenes and never allowing them the slightest glimpse of one's real sexual predicament.
As we approach towards modern and postmodern times, we know both world wars devastated the world, and it was reflected in literature as well. So, I would now invite Princey for the recitation of the next work.
Our next work is Gerontion by Thomas. Eliot was a poet, essayist, publisher, playwright, literary critic, and editor. Considered one of the 20th century's most major poets, he is a central figure in English language and modernist poetry. Our present poem, Gerontion, is a poem published in 1920. The title is Greek for Little Old Man, and the poem is a dramatic monologue relating the opinions and impressions of an elderly man, which describes Europe after the World War I through the eyes of a man who has lived most of his life in the 19th century. 2 years after it was published, Eliot considered including the poem as a preface to The Waste Land, but was talked out of this by Ezra Pound. Along with the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock and The Waste Land and other works published by Eliot in the early part of his career, Gerontion discusses themes of religion, sexuality, and other general topics of modernist poetry. Now, the poem. Thou hast nor youth nor age, but as it were an after dinner sleep, dreaming of both. Here I am, an old man in a dry month, being read to by a boy waiting for rain. I was neither at the hot gates nor out in the warm rain, nor knee deep in the salt marsh, heaving a cutlass bitten by flies out. My house is a decayed house, and the dew scats on the window sill. The owner spawned in some estaminet of Antwerp, blistered in Brussels, patched and peeled in London. The goat coughs at night in the field overhead. Rocks, moss, stone crop, iron, murds. The woman keeps the kitchen, makes tea, sneezes at evening, poking the Pewis gutter. And I, an old man, a dull head among windy spaces. Signs are taken for wonders. We youth see a sign, the word within a word, unable to speak a word, swaddled with darkness in the juviscence of the ear. Came Christ the tiger in depraved May, dogwood and chestnut flowering Judas, to be eaten, to be divided, to be drunk among whispers, by Mr. Silvero with caressing hands, at Limoges, who walked all night in the next room, by Hakagawa bowing among the Titans, by Madame de Tornquist in the dark room sifting the candles, Florian von Kulp, who turned in the hall, one hand on the door, vacant shutters, weaved the wind. I have no ghosts, an old man in a draughty house under a windy knob. After such knowledge, what forgiveness? Think now, history has many cunning passages, contrived corridors and issues, deceives with whispering ambitions, guides us by vanities. Think now, she gives when our attention is distracted, and what she gives with such supple confusions that the giving famishes the craving, gives too late what's not believed in or is still believed. In memory only reconsidered passion, gives too soon into weak hands what's thought can be dispensed with, till the refusal propagates a fear. Think neither fear nor courage saves us. Unnatural vices are fathered by our heroism. Virtues are forced upon us by our impudent crimes. These tears are second from the wrath bearing tree. The tiger springs in the new year, us he devours. Things think at last we have not reached conclusion when I Stephen in a rented house. Think at last I have not made this so purposelessly, and it is not by any concitation of the backward devils. I would meet you upon this honestly. I that was near your heart was removed therefrom. Lose beauty in terror, terror in inquisition. I have lost my passion. Why should I need to keep it, since what is kept must be adulterated? I have lost my sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. How should I use it for your closer contact? These with a thousand small deliberations protect the prophet of their chill delirium, excite the membrane when the sense has cooled, with pungent sauces, multiply variety. In a wilderness of mirrors, what will the spider do? Suspend its operations? Will the weevil delay? De Balhek, Fresca, Mrs. Camel, whirled beyond the circuit of the shuddering beer. In fractured atoms, gull against the wind, in the windy straits of Belle Isle, or running on the Horn, white feathers in the snow, the Gulf claims, and an old man driven by the tenants of the house, thoughts of a dry brain in a dry season.
Now, I would request Shreya to take over for the last work for today.
Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, published in 1948, is a leading play in the theatre of absurd, a theatrical outcome of postmodernism which was inspired by existential philosophy and its view that at the root of our being there is nothinglessness. Lucky's speech is probably the most spectacular part of Waiting for Godot. It is not just nonsense, verbal chaos. It also symbolizes the disorientation of the 20th century. Once put into action by an order and putting on his hat, this animal man produces like a robot a string of words. Repetitions, nonsensical sounds stay in the mind of the listener. Then there are strangely ordered subordinate clauses and big words, encyclopedic splinters of thoughts and cliches from different areas from life. It ends in a struggle between him and his three listeners until he is silenced by removing his hat. Now to the speech. Given the existence as uttered forth in the public works of Puncher and Watman of a personal quad, qua 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 qua, with white beard, qua 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 qua, outside time, without extension, who from the heights of divine apatheia, divine athembia, divine aphasia, loves us dearly, with some exceptions for reason unknown, but time will tell, and suffers like the divine Miranda with those who for reasons unknown, but time will tell, are plunged in torment, plunged in fire, whose fire flames, if that continues, and who can doubt it will fire the firmament. That is to say, blast hell to heaven so blue, still and calm, so calm, with a calm which even though intermittent is better than nothing, but not so fast and considerate. What is more than that, as a result of the labors left unfinished, crowned by the Academy of the Anthropometry of Esse in Posse of Testu and Cunard, it is established beyond all other doubt, than that which clings to the labors of men, that as a result of the labors unfinished of Testu and Cunard, it is established as hereinafter, but not so fast, for reasons unknown, that as a result of the public works of Puncher and Watman, It is established beyond all doubt that in view of the labors of Patu and Belcher left unfinished for reason unknown, of Testu and Cunard left unfinished, it is established what many deny, that man in Fosse of Testu and Cunard, that man in Essie, that man in short, that man in brief, in spite of the strides of alimentation and defecation, is seen to waste and pine and concurrently, simultaneously. What is more, the practice of sports such as tennis, football, running, cycling, swimming, flying, floating, riding, gliding, canoeing, camogie, skating, tennis of all kinds, dying, flying, sports of all sorts, autumn, summer, winter tennis of all kinds, hockey of all sorts, penicillin and Sacadenia, in a word, I resume and concurrently, simultaneously, for reasons unknown, to shrink and dwindle. In spite of the tennis, I resume flying, gliding, golf over 9 and 18 holes, tennis of all sorts, in a word, for reasons unknown, of Peckham, Pleckham, Fulham, Clapham, namely, concurrently, simultaneously, what is more for reasons unknown, but time will tell. To shrink and dwindle, I resume Fulham, Clapham, in a word, the dead loss per caput. Since the death of Bishop Berkeley being to the tune of 1 inch 4 caput per ounce per caput, approximately by and large more or less to the nearest decimal good measure round figures, star naked in the stockinged feet in Connemara, in a word for reasons unknown. No matter what matter, the facts are there, and considering what is much more grave that in the light of the labors lost of Steenweg and Peterman, it appears what is much more grave that in the light of the labors lost of Steenweg and Peterman, that in the plains, in the mountains, by the seas, by the rivers, running water, running fire, the air in the same, and then the earth, namely the air, and then the earth in the great cold, the great dark, the air and the earth, abode of stones in the great cold, alas, in the of their lords 600 and something, the air, the earth, the sea, the earth, abode of stones in the great deeps, the great cold on sea, on land, and in the air. I resume for reasons unknown. In spite of the tennis, the facts are there, but time will tell. I resume, alas, on, in short, in fine, on abode of stones, who can doubt it? I resume, but not so fast. I resume the skull, to shrink and waste and concurrently, simultaneously, what is more for reasons unknown, in spite of the tennis, on the beard, the flames, the tears, the stones, so blue, so calm, alas, on the skull, in Connemara, in spite of the tennis, the labors abandoned, left unfinished, graver still abode of stones, in a word, I resume, alas, abandoned, unfinished, the skull in Connemara, in spite of the tennis, the skull, alas, the stones, Cunard, tennis, the stones, so calm, Cunard, unfinished.
So that brings us to the end of today's session. Regular reading helps us to get first-hand information of text and gets us to know the writer as well and understand values as well. TES Reading Club is a wonderful platform where students and scholars volunteer and read out various works live on YouTube every Sunday at 2 p.m. So all the voracious readers and literature enthusiasts are invited to join TES Reading Club on Telegram, or leave us a message below and we'll get back to you. I would like to end this session with a big thanks to our dear teacher, Dr. Kalyani ma'am, for this wonderful program, to all the wonderful readers who read amazingly today, and to all our YouTube supporters whose love is what keeps us moving. Thank you one and all. Meet you next Sunday at 2 p.m. Please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to watch all the previous videos.